Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria with another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and entrepreneurial success. Our guest today is Sam Thiara. Sam Thiara is a professional who has created a personal journey as a coach, speaker, storyteller, writer, workshop facilitator, educator, entrepreneur, and community activator. His work is reflected in the hundreds of individuals he has mentored, numerous organizations he has supported, and the over 45 nonprofits that he has worked with over the years. Presently, Sam is the founder and chief motivating officer at Ignite the Dream Coaching and Consulting, as well as a lecturer at Simon Fraser University. This allows him to bring academic and practical stories to enrich any work environment, organizational alignment, and improvements to companies. He's also the author of Lost and Found, Seeking the Past and Finding Myself. Welcome to the show, Sam Thiara.
Well, thanks for having me, Joanne. And I just can say goodbye now. I think everyone knows everything about me now.
Well, but they might need a story or two.
There you go.
I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it? Talking about you and your stories and how you help others live their life through their stories, because the stories is pretty much all we've got.
Absolutely.
In my opinion. I mean, you can go to school, that's still a story, but it's just part of a story. Mm-hmm. The story of your life. I remember years ago, some healer / psychic / whatever told me that I would be telling the stories of the grandmothers. Mm-hmm. And in reading your bio today and while looking at your website, that brought it back to my head. And I'm going, I don't know my grandmothers. But you're going to tell us today what you found out about your grandmothers based on your book.
Exactly.
So what made you decide to go to India and find yourself?
Well, I mean, I'm a British-born Canadian with parents from Fiji and grandparents that emerged from India. And, visibly, I look Indian. So it's very common for people to come up and say, well, as a conversation, what part of India are you from? And then I say, well, I was born in England and raised in Canada. And they're like, yeah. No. What part of India are your parents from? Because they're trying to scope it out. I was like, oh, my parents are from Fiji Islands, and that's near Australia. And they're like, oh, are you Indian? And I'm like, well, my grandparents and my ancestors come from India. And then on the flip side, other people will be like, well, you're not Indian, you're Canadian. And it's like...
that conversation.
And here's the other one is when you've gone through all of this, then they say, no, but really, where are you from? And I'm like, okay, planet Earth is a good place to start. Mm-hmm. And let's work our way from there. So, I mean, leaving England as a wee lad, but moving to Vancouver, I've lived most of my life here. And I mean, I saw myself as always Canadian. And, we play hockey, we eat hot dogs, and we scrape our knees, we bleed maple syrup. I mean, that's how Canadian I am. Mm-hmm. And, you grow up in this region, and then, you see yourself as this, image or this persona. And I still remember that when I went to school here, I mean, we were in predominantly white neighborhoods, nothing out of the ordinary. But I remember being in high school for the first year as a grade 8 student and walking down the hallway and all of a sudden getting, just sort of hit on the side of the head and knocked to the ground by a humongous grade 12 student who basically said, I don't like Indians. And I was like, I'm Canadian. And he goes, no, you're Indian. And it sort of started throwing that piece about identity. Mm-hmm. Well, all of a sudden, it's when I got to university and in a much more global audience that all of a sudden I was meeting people from all around the world, from all parts of this world. And those who came from South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, and regions around there always spoke about their cultural identity, their cultural background, the food. And I felt like I was missing something. And I remember years later, as I tried to always walk and traverse in various areas. So depending on where I am, if I'm in England, I'm British. If I'm, traveling down to Fiji, I'm Fijian, or etc. But I always felt that Indian piece was always a weaker tone in my life. And a number of years ago, I said to myself, I want to maybe venture out and go to India to really explore the country, because I don't know anything about it. But equally at the same time, our identity, that identity is something that I wanted to just sort of see, but learn about that Indian background. But also, we didn't know where our ancestral roots exactly were. We knew it was in northern India, in the state of Punjab, but equally at the same time, my grandfather left India when he was like 18 years old, hopped on a steamer ship, made his way to Fiji, and that's where he landed. And, eventually my father and my mother, eventually they moved to England, where I was born, and then Canada. But we always were very separated from that Indian side, because my father's never been to India. My mom's never been to India. And I thought, no, this is something I really want to do. And my father's older brother, he passed away many years ago, but I recall he had gone to India a few times and had actually gone to our village, but nobody knew where this village was, except what he knew, but nobody had that transfer of knowledge. But I remember a couple of days before I left for India, all I had was the name of the village. It sits about 7 miles from this town, and it sits in this one district called Hoshiarpur. Well, my cousin had sent me a photograph of the people from our village, and it was about a 3.5 inch by 3.5 orange dingy photo of a house with people standing in front of it. And you couldn't really make them out, but you could see people were there. So I had this photograph and very little information available. And I thought, well, let's go. And turned to my wife. I said, I'd like to do this, and, we'll go explore India, but equally at the same time, I'd like to, go on this journey to maybe find my grandfather's house, my paternal grandfather's house. And, all of a sudden it was, when I got to India, I was a foreigner going to a land that shouldn't be foreign to me, in search of a needle in a haystack, and not sure where this haystack was.
Oh.
So you sort of go there and you were like, okay, here I am. And it was overwhelming. Like, I don't know, the best way for me to describe it is all your senses are going to be overwhelmed when you get to India. It has magnificence and it has injustices, but it's all part of that experience. And Joanne, the other thing it helped me to realize is the difference between being a tourist and a traveler. My wife is a tourist, and there's nothing wrong with being a tourist, but she wants to go and see things, but not experience. I want to experience. I want to experience the culture, the food, the vibrancy of the place. I don't want to be said, okay, here, told, okay, you have 20 minutes to take your photos, and, you'll be here. And again, that's totally fine with so many people that want to be tourists, not a problem. But I just realized that's not me. So the journey opened up 2 avenues for me, or 2 windows. One was the journey to find my ancestral roots, but the journey was to also realize my identity. And I needed clarity on this.
Why were you? I have
Oh, no, go ahead.
What do you mean, your identity?
Well, the identity, as an individual, this identity with regards to, this Indian influence and culture, the British influence and culture, the Fijian and the Canadian. And this is where it's actually interesting, because I always saw my life as what I call a thali. And a thali is a platter with these metal dishes, and they're all segmented and separated. So I always found that when I was in, school or work, I was always Canadian. And when I was in, other parts of my life, or when I go to England, I'm British. And, this identity piece was always there, but they were always segmented. And the India one was a cup that was always not full, or the bowl was never full, because I didn't know enough about it. So that's part of this identity piece that I wanted to go realize and to bring forward. And it was interesting because I remember traveling through India, experiencing the country, and, being a traveler and, embracing everything that I was, it's like tasting ice cream for the first time and realizing that this is a magnificent place, but there's also this injustice and, challenges, but equally resilience that I was seeing. But I remember waking up just abruptly at 4 a.m. Before I was heading to one of the more spiritual places. And I suddenly realized that I was always looking at my life as this thali, this platter with segmented dishes, and my life was always in those segmented dishes, the culture, those identities. But I realized instead of a thali, my life is what I call khichdi. And khichdi is this Indian rice dish that's a blend of flavor.
Yeah, I remember. I made it several times.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just like what you do is you bring the rice and you go to your fridge and you throw the vegetables in and with yogurt or whatever, and you just mix all the spices together.
Yeah.
And that was the epiphany I had when I was going to be going to the Golden Temple was that I'm khichdi. I'm not a thali. I'm a blend of flavors. And that's where that clarity and identity came forward to say, I'm going to embrace all of my background. And I went to India to search for my Indian identity. My realization was I was always Indian, but I just needed that awakening by going there. So that was the identity piece and the clarity by being khichdi as opposed to a thali.
I understand that separateness was gone. Had you visited Fiji?
Yep. So prior to going to India, I had been to Fiji numerous times. And I think that was the first eye-opening experience I had, because prior to going to Fiji, I had always gone back to England, and that was very easy, very comfortable, and with regards to being similar to Canada to some extent. Whereas when I went to Fiji, all of a sudden I was surrounded by people that were either native Fijian or Indo-Fijian, and my family background, because it's about 50-50 split. And all of a sudden you're walking around going, everybody is sort of like me, and to some extent. And it really opened my eyes to, and I think that was important for me because it allowed me to not just jump into India without any sort of understanding or anticipation of it. It allowed me to say, okay, I've been to places where, yeah, there are people that are like me to some extent. And it helped to allow me to adapt easier to India. As a result of going to Fiji.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I mean, you are searching for your self,
Yes.
The spiritual self, the physical self, the mental self, and this trip to India was, since it was new, you hadn't done that before. You had been several trips to Fiji and in Great Britain, et cetera, et cetera. So this was a big ta-da to go to India. And, from what my experience, I've never been there, but, from films and this and that and everything else, it's probably multicultural in itself.
Yes.
Because there Absolutely. There's different parts of India, different food in different parts of India, different dresses and clothing in different parts of India, different everything. So you're going to, what did you mention first? You're going to another land that has the thalis.
Yeah.
Within itself.
Yeah. Oh no, totally. And India itself is a thali because it's I agree exactly to your words. It's a unique place with so much diversity, so much difference. And like you say, the flavors, like if you go to the south, the food there is way different than if you went to the province of Gujarat in the center or Punjab, which is up in the north. The food is all different. The dressing is all different. The language is different and all these dialects. And it's almost like a continent within itself. And, and it's always interesting because there are times where, I've had situations where people said, "Oh, I've got this client here, and would you be able to help translate because they're English, they're struggling with it." And my first comment to them is, "Can you tell me what their name is?" And then they look at me going like, oh, does that matter? And I said, well, absolutely, because then I know whether I'm able to communicate with them, or at least, for example, if it's somebody who's from the Punjab and they speak Punjabi, I don't speak Punjabi. I can speak Hindi, and there's enough of a transference of language that we could probably understand each other, but not to a point where I would say that I would translate. So that's where it's so diverse. And like I love the way you said that. India itself is a thali, and this realization that we live in that world of it literally is a continent within a country.
Well, what you're talking about and what I'm doing in my own work right now is talking. It's a parallel. It's an alignment with patterns. When we're born, we have a pattern based on where we live, how our parents speak to us, how we are treated in school, and so on and so forth. And what you have is your own patterns based on your cultural designation, let's say, for a better word right now. Yeah. So you have a cultural designation, you're Indian, but within the Indian, you're from the South, whatever that's called. And then on top of that, you gather all of these circumstances and they make a small part of you. I mean, what is it? A 1/8 part of you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And yet, it speaks to you so ferociously that you decided to write a book about it.
Yeah. And it was
teach.
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. It's I use this in the classes that I teach as well, because it's also about the search for, what might be missing, which was my ancestral roots. And again, I'm surprised at taking that on with just this faded photograph and the name of the village, and just whatever sparse information I had, because, you talk to people who actually are from there, like the name of the village. I would ask people and they said, never heard of it. I'd say, well, my father said that he would always mail letters to this town called Garshankar, and it sits about 6 miles away from our village. And people said, well, I've heard of Garshankar and I've been there many times, but never heard of your village. And, you start wondering, what type of a search is this going to be? And I remember a day before I left, so 2 days before I got the photograph, before I left, my step cousin from Fiji sent me a note saying he made it to Garshankar, but never found the village. But he gave me a different name for the village. It was related to what we thought it was, but it wasn't the same. And I thought, okay, maybe that's what, my grandfather told my father, who told me. And as you pass it along, much like the telephone game, maybe it wasn't exactly accurate. And maybe what my step cousin had is the name. So the name of our village is Chadodi, but he said the name of the village is Janodi. And I thought Janodi, it sounds very similar. And I searched and I couldn't find a Janodi, but I found this place called Jandoli, 6 miles from Garshankar, which is what we understood it. And I thought Chadodi, Jandoli, that sounds way too close. And maybe that's where, through that telephone game of my grandfather telling my father and family members to us, and there's nothing written down, it's all oral. So we went to Jandoli, and what I will share with you is Jandoli, beautiful people, wrong village. And we went to numerous houses with this photograph. Everybody wanted to help. And what I loved about Jandoli is, after we knew that this was the wrong village, the elder, he said, do you know what? Tomorrow, just come back and spend time with us and, make this your home, make this your village. And I thought, wow, like that was very important to me. But when I went back to my hotel room, I phoned my father because I wanted to let him know that we didn't find the village. And, he just said, you know what, you're doing what nobody else has done. It's okay. Just enjoy India. But Joanne, it was really important to me for two reasons. And I write about it in the book. The first reason is when I was 9 years old, my father had an industrial accident and became a paraplegic. And, I just remember, he's done a lot for me and I wanted to do this for him. And, he's never been to India. And the second part is this thin thread that connects us back to our village. If I don't find the village, that thread will break because nobody's going to be doing this search as far as, in the time that we have. So instead, the next day, I basically just told my driver, I said, forget what people said. Let's just drive to Gaushankar. Let's just talk to people. It's, supposedly it's nearby. And sure enough, we got to Gaushankar. And it was always interesting as well, because people would say, you're not going to get a good reception if you find the village. You're not going to find the village. We've never heard of it. So there was always this noise. But, and sure enough, in Gaushankar, people were like, nope, never heard of it. And that's, 6 miles away, whatever, supposed to be. And then eventually one gentleman said, oh, you're looking for Chadodi. It's up the road this way. And I had to do a double take. I said, are you sure? Like Chadodi? And he said, yeah, I've heard of Chadodi. It's 6 miles down the road that way. So we drove to this, along this roadway, and there was this archway. And an old man was seated at this archway, just basically staring at the ground. And I remember we gave him the picture, and he looked at this picture. And I write in my journal, well, here we go again. This isn't like an 80-year-old gentleman, no glasses. It's a faded photograph. You can barely make out the people, especially the people in the background. And the guy says, well, I don't know about the house, but the person in the back looks like so-and-so. So he gets into our vehicle, which was very common for people to do when they were trying to help us. And our driver says, okay, guide me. So we drive to a house. He said, okay, stop here. And, we get out, and he walks with this photograph up this driveway, and us in tow behind. People came out of the house, and, they're looking at us inquisitively. And then, he shows the picture, and I overhear this one lady saying, that's me in the picture. Who are you guys?
Oh, my.
And it was like, I had to do again a double take. I said, hold it. You're in the picture? She goes, yeah, this is me. But who are you all? And all of a sudden, we started describing who we were. And all of a sudden, she was just broke into tears. She was like, oh, my gosh, like, you are family. Like, it's my grandfather's older brother's family that I'm now with.
Oh, my.
And all of this emerged just out of this persistence, not listening to the noise, overcoming obstacles. And the beauty of it is the gentleman who took us to the house, I eventually, after we let our guards down about, who we were and all of that information, and we knew that this was all family, I turned around and that old man was gone. Oh. And I don't know where he went.
He disappeared into the ether.
I think he did. So, and it was beautiful because we were able to reconnect with my grandfather's older brother's family. This is where my grandfather left from. And I took Ziploc bags with me. So I went out into the fields, scooped up dirt, and I brought the village home to my father. And I said, here, and I gave it to all my relatives as well, handed them scoops of these little containers of dirt. And I said, this comes from our village. This is where our roots are from. And it just was this beautiful sentiment and, just the ability to reconnect, and that's why the book is called Lost and Found, Seeking the Past and Finding Myself, because by seeking the past, I was able to reconnect with our ancestral roots, but also finding myself because of that thali and the khichdi piece. But that's the story that emerged out of that journey to India.
So did you have here something about you help individuals use the 5 core elements?
Right.
What are those?
Yeah, so I always found that for me, I was just, doing that usual journey of the corporate job that many people have moved from, let's say, university into a entry-level job and then through the organization. And I just remember working in a corporate job, and I had been there for 6.5 years. And for me, that corporate job felt like the way I use an analogy is like a 52 short suit. I'm a 42 regular, but that career felt like a 52 short suit. In other words, I could wear the suit, it doesn't fit. I could wear this career or this job, but it just didn't feel right. And I started focusing on this idea that instead of what am I doing, who am I? And when I started focusing on who I am, I started to fashion a tailored suit as a career or a job. And I suddenly realized, what are the 5 things that I'm not willing to compromise in life and career? And eventually I picked 5 things which have changed over time. So today my 5 things are servant leadership, story sharing, activator igniter, champion enabler, and community do-gooder. The moment I nailed my first 5 foundations, it made me realize the clarity that I wasn't in the right job. And it helped me to realize the direction I needed to go, to say, okay, if it's not this, then what? What it allowed me to do was to build this foundation and then to say, this matters to me. I'm not willing to compromise these 5 things, but how am I going to shift? And the way that I always tell people that I help them find the 5 core elements is I ask them, some questions, and I ask them why. So for example, I would say, based on the current job or previous jobs, depending on as we're talking, what do you like about your job? What do you not like about the job? Tell me why. And then we start going down deeper on what they like or dislike and why. And then it's like, when you were in school, what courses did you like or didn't like? Tell me why. What about on your social spare time? Tell me what you like to do and don't like to do and why. And through that inquisition, what you get is, some words that emerge. And the beauty of this is you find that clarity, because now you have this foundational piece that enables you and allows you to have this, ability to, now have a place to work from. And that's the beauty of it. And you move forward from that.
Yes, you have your Venn diagram in place.
That's right.
And I think more people need to do what you said, this searching for, listen to your own noise. Don't listen to anybody else's noise. So if you're asking these questions, what do you like? What don't you like? Whatever the list is and how it's fluid and it changes over time depending upon where you are in your life.
Yes. And
that they have to know that it will change in their life as well, because I think a lot of people get attached to 1, 2, 3, 1 through 10, and A through Z, and not know that there's probably a subtext of numbers and alphabets out there, which there are, that it's fluid. It moves. The world moves every breath we take.
Oh, and change is ever present, and it's always when I talk to people. It's almost like for me, I've got multiple projects that I'm working on right now, but I don't take on anything unless it hits the 5 out of 5. And, so for example, being an author and a writer was never a goal and objective, but it hit 5 out of 5. When to be a lecturer in a university was never a goal and objective, but it hits 5 out of 5. That's what I use as my tool with regards to realizing the direction I need to go.
Yeah, one that's important to me is I must enjoy what I am doing.
Yes.
I must enjoy it. There must be fun. There must be laughter. There must be joy. And if there is none of that, if it's just a heavy duty job or project or whatever, why? Why? There are a lot of other people who are willing to do that, and they don't want to have enjoyment. Yeah. And anything less than enjoyment is suffering, and I'm not into suffering anymore. No. Notice that qualifier.
Absolutely. And it's also the realization when you work with people that they realize, wait, I'm on the wrong train. And it's like, okay, so let's get you at the next stop. And, it's also about the fact that you don't just quit your job tomorrow and say, okay, that's it. I'm not in the right job. It's about doing all of the work now to say, okay, if it's not this, what can it be? And then you start focusing on, okay, now what are the things that I can do right now to help me get where I need to go? And that's the important part is, it's not just, okay, I'm on the wrong train. I'm just going to jump out of the train now. It's more like, okay, let's get to the stop. But how do you build in all of those components that you now need?
Yes, the next step. What's the next step?
Yeah.
Some of the steps might be larger. There might be a leap instead of a 6-inch rise, but you have to know that and trust that next step will be the key. Yeah. So, Sam, how can people find you?
Yeah. So, easiest way, I have a website, so it's www.sam-thiara.com. And I've got about 185 blog posts that I've written, but they're all there for anybody to, have these experiences, life lessons and insights. I'm also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, so people are more than easily accessible, are able to contact me.
Well, that's good, because I think you're going to have a lot of interest in this cultural detective journey. It's it's an inside journey as well as an exterior journey.
Yes.
And the ghosts that you found along the way, that's another one.
Of course. And there's so many stories to share. So happy to, have people chime in or realize maybe their own journey to find their ancestral roots and, stories and ideas.
Well, everybody who's listening, Sam Thiara is a coach, speaker, storyteller, and writer, amongst other things. And if you want him to be a speaker at your group, at your business, at your college, at your whatever, contact him at sam-thiara.com, sam-thiara, and he does have a way for you to connect with him. I want to thank Sam Thiara for being here today and talking to us about his journey to find his ancestral roots, some of them.
Exactly.
And the ones that had been missing.
I do want to say thank you for the opportunity of sharing, and hopefully there are some insights. And even for myself, there's a quote that I live by that I would like to share with your audience. And there's two. And the first one is, obstacles are the necessary bricks on the road to our success. Don't fear the obstacles. Embrace them. They are there as learning opportunities for you. And that's where the growth happens and the magic happens.
Yes.
And the second quote is, everyone's life is an autobiography. Make yours worth reading. Every single one of us is a living story. Share your magnificence. You may not feel it, that you've got that magnificence, but if you've got a story, it's worth sharing, and just live your story.
Yes, and you'd be surprised how it will affect others.
Yes.
We don't know that until somebody tells us. So be willing to share all of who you are.
Yes.
And see what happens, see what comes back. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.